Thank you for all your contributions today, for the discussions, for the exchange we did today. Innovations has been the topic of today. In these 6 sessions, we learned a lot. I visited all the sessions about innovations at the workplaces in connection with hazardous substances, musculoskeletal disorders, and smart factories. As I said yesterday, scientific exchange between all of you was the focus of this meeting. And it's good to know that we are here to learn from each other, and that we are successful in learning from each other. Now at the end of our research exchange meeting, the moderators of the sessions will reflect the lessons learned for PEROH and also for the workplace safety, or health and safety at work. So I ask the moderators, and they answer please in pairs on the different sessions. So what are the innovations, or what innovations will influence our workplaces within the next 5 years the most? Can you give a short answer to this, please?
Certainly. We had a very varied session, and essentially in summary, we heard about a lot of different technological advances that would help us better understand exposures, but also we had models which would help us predict the impact of interventions for the future.
Based on the presentation this afternoon, I can see that there's a lot of work has been done to identify the issues and problems, and also there's a lot of capability there to help us to investigate more. However, when this evidence is going to be used to support development of intervention, we have to consider really how that intervention will happen. And I think in the next 5 years, probably we need to look at people's behavior, behavior changes, how they adopt this innovation and how they react to it. And that's my conclusion.
Thank you. For the musculoskeletal disorder?
If I focus on physical inactivity in office workplaces, I think the innovations will be dynamic workstations, sit-stand workstations. I believe the Netherlands and Germany are leading the way. Other countries will follow. And I truly believe in sensor-driven feedback. We all have a smartphone. Sensors are getting smaller and smaller. And with the help of simple apps, sensor-driven feedback will be used to stimulate and to stimulate people to show healthier behavior.
So in the first musculoskeletal disorders session, we had a lot of discussion about how big a challenge it is, how a lot of work has already been done, but we still have a huge challenge on tackling MSDs in the workplace. And something that came out really strongly in the first 2 talks was the multifactorial aspect of it. So we are looking at psychosocial factors, we are looking at MSDs and the combination. And it is really for us as PEROH researchers to be taking that in-depth multifactorial approach. And then, and I think it links with Yi Chin's comments, we were saying we need an interdisciplinary approach. So we were also talking about how we have the challenge of producing solutions, but needing to look at leadership and behavioral change and how they work in workplaces so that all of this knowledge is transferred into improvements in MSDs.
So for the smart factories or Industry 4.0?
Well, very difficult question, this one. What's the most important technological innovation? Because so much is going on in robotics, in automation, in digitization, in artificial intelligence, and so on. And so there are numerous applications which usually combine several technologies in itself. So that's very difficult. So I would say we are in a transition, and this will continue. And it's also nicely illustrated by one of the presentations in my sessions who said, well, this Da Vinci surgery robot is a top robot, a very clever thing. But at the same time there are shortcomings, and it will develop further with all the new technologies will go on in the next decades. So we're in the middle of it. So it's hard to answer the question, what's the most important innovation?
But you gave some hints.
From the perspective of occupational safety and health, I would say the most important ones are the ones that makes our life, working life, better, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there isn't much to add actually, because there was the first workshop was very technical, and the innovations which were presented in that workshop we thought are all very important, and Michael just reported what they were. But then in the second workshop, which was a bit more heterogeneous, we found that there are, apart from those technical solutions, that there are also social innovations, referring to processes, referring to social relationships in organizations that have to be considered, and that has a strong relationship also to skills which we need in future.
Okay, my second question is, what is our key message for a practitioner as an outcome of the research project which have been presented today? What can a practitioner learn from this? Not a big, some ideas.
Okay, I think for my session, the key message was what a huge range of potential solutions there are for occupational health problems, and that may be has to be different for different types of illness. We had a very nice study looking at asthma with cleaning agents, measuring it in air, comparing different types of spray, and being able to recommend a certain type of spray. But we also had discussions about more difficult diseases, long latency diseases, cancer, COPD, where without a time machine we need a different way of looking at those illnesses, and that might be the use of modelling to look at interventions, or it might be using leading indicators. So it's the range of approaches, I think, that's the key thing.
Okay, thank you.
From my sessions, there's a lot of presentation about the health effect of cleaning agents, health effects of or measurement of nanoparticles, and also the health effect of metalworking fluids, and also about the effectiveness of the respiratory protective equipment to protect workers from hazardous biological aerosols. And all these presentations indicate there's an opportunity for innovation. How can we have a better product? So that's, I think, the principle, the first principle of disease prevention is that we replace the hazardous substance with non-risk substance. And I understand that this is my first time in PEROH, and I know that history, PEROH has bring the director together to generate ideas, and then later to bring all the scientists together to exchange experience. And probably the next step will be bringing the industry together. So if PEROH is a catalyst for research project, maybe the next step would be a catalyst for innovation, because a lot of research has already identified innovations, but we can't do it ourselves. We have to work with the industry. So I think that's my message.
Good suggestion. Thank you. It's a big shoe. We would say or big shoe we have to wear there, but we will try what we can do. Diane?
Yeah, well, actually, I want to add another big shoe. I can't point out one key message from the various presentations I have heard this afternoon. That is difficult, but I do, as from my role as a consultant, I have a lot of contact with business, and what I see happening is that commercially developed products, they take over, and practitioners, they tend to believe the commercial talks, and I see a role for occupational health and safety experts to keep on bringing across the evidence-based message, and that does not always fit the commercial message. So I think that's what I would like to tell the practitioners. Please listen to the experts, keep up your evidence-based knowledge, and don't believe every commercial talk about new products.
So the first session also talked about the importance of robust evidence. And again, I think that's a really important message for practitioners. And we also had some important findings on good jobs. What is a good job? And a real message for practitioners, for workplaces, that it's not always helpful to look at risks in isolation. When you're doing your risk assessment, think about the totality of the risk. So in our case, MSDs and psychosocial, don't try and extricate them, look at what is a good job.
Michael?
Yes,
It's on.
it's on. Well, one take-home message for practitioners might be, be there in the beginning when there is at the start of design, before implementation, stand strong for occupational safety and health, and make sure that there's at least someone who is thinking about the new innovation from that perspective. So be influential in the beginning. That requires that you are able to talk with technology developers. So to some level you have to be an expert on that as well. That's one take-home message. Another one is, you learn, that was mentioned by Pauline actually, you learn as soon as you start working with a product, with a robot for instance. You can talk a lot about it and what could be the effect and so on. But if you start working with a robot, you really learn what the shortcomings are, what skills are required for people, how it influences job design and so on. So you can learn a lot by starting working with robots.
Very good.
So in the workshop it was agreed that transfer, and basically it is about transfer into practice and other fields outside the very narrow system of the scientific community, that this is very important, and that also in terms of what are relevant research questions, we should integrate practitioners from the very start, and so that this is a very interactive process. But then we also saw in the different presentations that it always depends on the field of research and how far or how much evidence we have gained already. We had one example about from Finland about 3D printing, where there are already very concrete guidelines for which tackle the outcomes of this research, and others are in a very early stage. So you can't really say, so this is the message in terms of transfer, it depends on the field of research. But nevertheless, I mean, at least in Germany, and this is not a result of the workshop, but there is this paper of the National Scientific Board that just searching, in your chamber, just publishing papers is not contributing to society. So research has another task, and that this has to be considered more in future. So the scientific board say this has to be considered more. If you have a look at the actual papers in scientific journals, you don't find very much about practical recommendations based on the evidence which is described in the paper. So I think there is really a lot to do in this respect, and it's also our task when we do our research to think about this transfer and that it is important and that we have a mandate to do this.
So my very last question, please with a short answer. Do you have a hint for our junior researchers? What are the skills they need for their work for tomorrow?
Okay, thank you. I would say, probably leading on from the last set of comments, being able to take a step back and understanding where your research fits into the bigger picture.
Okay.
So rather than being tied down into just doing your research, why are you doing it? What are the implications? What does it mean for the individual in the workplace?
Thank you. What I can think of for the young researcher is to develop your research question properly, and also when you develop the research question, think about application.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Fine, thank you.
I would like to add to those very good suggestions. Build on your communication skills. Make sure that you start presenting from the very first moment, not only for a scientific audience, but also for an audience with common people. So learn to bring across your message in simple words as soon as possible.
I think as scientists, to be curious, to be open-minded, and to be skeptical. So much of what we hear is looking at past information, what was thought to be good, and when you do that rigorous evidence, you find you have to do it differently. I would also say, and again from the discussion at this fantastic session this morning, the importance of multidisciplinary work. Take your opportunities to talk to your colleagues within your institutes and within PEROH institutes, because that multidisciplinary working can really help you as a researcher to get your results making a difference in the working world.
Yes, what should I add to that?
I'm curious.
I think you mentioned everything that I have not much, and I cannot much add to that. I was thinking also about the nice crossovers, the nice combination of disciplines that you should combine in order to make a difference. But that's more or less what you said.
Very good.
Well, when we asked this question in our workshop, there were actually people who said, yeah, well, those young researchers need more knowledge about practice. And when we discussed, well, how would they get this knowledge, there was the idea, well, they could do an apprenticeship, they could do work practice, but the whole idea was that they have to understand where what the research results are for. So they have to understand what the final benefit is and what really happens in the actual workplace. Sorry, I have to turn around, because all our notes are on a flip chart. And another thing, which we are actually doing here, is networking. So young researchers have to network, and in that respect, I think that a workshop or a conference like this, where you particularly put emphasis on having the young people in the workshop and enable them to network and to get other views, that's particularly important. In the last workshop, we also said that we have been discussing technical innovations a lot, and these will require new skills and also, or particularly for those young people, beyond skills, they need not just abilities but competencies in terms of networking, in terms of, as Mary said, being critical and being innovative. And that is an interactive process. So you have the new techniques, you have the skills, and the skills which then refer back to the invention of new techniques. And that was another point which was made by, I think, Pauline in our workshop.
So thank you for all the moderators for the great work today and for your answers. Thank you all for coming, and please give us a feedback. Write me a mail, or Jean-Michiel Meofsen or Annika Decker. What is your opinion? Should we repeat it after 2 years? Is that a good networking what we do, or do you see it critical? What can we do in a better way? And then my last thing is I wish you a safe journey back, and let's keep in touch.